I'll be helping Randy with being the moderator. I'd like to give an introduction to Randy Jeffries before he dives into his presentation here. Randy's been with UDOT for 17 years. He's led a number of projects in northern Utah, including Riverdale Road, the I-15 Now project, SR 193 extension, SR 108, Logan Canyon, and then the West Davis Corridor EIS. More than engineering, he values working together with stakeholders to find solutions that benefit all involved. And you'll hear a little bit more about that today. He lives in South Ogden with his wife Christy and 6 kids. He absolutely loves camping and backpacking, and as such has been a scoutmaster for 12 years and counting. And he's my close personal friend. I think he'll have a good presentation. Randy?
All right, thank you. Thanks, Dan. We've got a new hood ornament. If you didn't catch one of these after the lunch, after Carlos' talk, it's got the new logo on it. It's pretty cool, so make sure you get one of those. But I'm here to talk about the West Davis Corridor project. This project's been underway for quite a number of years, about 6 years or so, and a lot can change in 6 years. We were talking with Dan the other day with the Langdon Group. We've had 4 marriages. We've had 8 babies born, and Brianne, another on the way in a couple weeks. Brianne, stand up, Brianne. You're our public involvement coordinator for the project. She wasn't even with UDOT when we started the project. You're in California, right, at the time, 2009? So she wasn't even here, hardly here in Utah. Kevin was actually, stand up, Kevin. Kevin also worked on the project. He's with HDR, but he was started with UDOT 6 years ago. But also there's been changes in our families. For example, our kids. For example, my son, this was him when we started, he was in junior high, and now he's a full-grown man in Texas somewhere, so quite a change for him. Of course, for me, this is what I look like now, unfortunately, but I used to have quite a head of hair 6 years ago. Now, if you look closely, any of you on the celebrity scene, you'll know that that's actually Owen Wilson's head that I was able to transpose my face onto. I did not look like that. I've always been kind of bald. Dan, I wish I could say the years have been kind to him. He's kind of struggled, took up smoking. You know, he's still wearing the same shirt and jacket. No, I'm kidding. Dan's a great guy. You just saw him. He's a very handsome man. Vince, well, what can I say about Vince? No changes. No changes at all. No, we like to have fun on West Davis. So we decided, you know, I think the program says we're going to give a brief update on what's happening and where we're going. I thought we'd change it a little bit more and have a little bit more fun and go back in time a little bit and go back and review some of the key decisions we made on the project to be educational and informative. So I thought we'd do it by getting you guys involved. If you remember back in the 80s, there's these cool books, the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I don't know, do we need to dim the lights a little bit? Seems like, can we have that happen? Okay. Let's see if we can dim them a little bit. That's good. That's good. I don't know if they would still print a book for kids with the title called You're Going to Die on it anymore. But anyway, these were really cool books, cool adventures, and you basically read part of the story, and then you get to the bottom of the page, and you have to choose between 2 routes, make a decision, and then your story changes. So we're going to do that with West Davis Corridor. And I also thought it'd be good, since I've got a whole bunch of smart people in the room, to answer some of life's greatest questions. So I need everybody to go to their cell phone, go to pollev.com/RJ785, okay? This is fun. This is not going to be one of those really laborious things. Or you can just text RJ785 to 22333. It works better to text from T-Mobile. So pollev.com/RJ785. Or you can just text RJ785 to 22333. And I really need your help because there's some real challenges and some questions I have for all of you guys. And for me to help me figure some things out. All right, I'm hoping many of you are there. That's okay. This will show up on the next slide as well. But the first question that I need help with, and this has been a perplexing question through all time, is which came first, the chicken or the egg? And so you can go right on. You can either And as you start to vote, you'll start to see your responses. And we're going to decide once and now, for all, which came first. So I'll be shocked if it's 50-50. You can see how the responses are coming in. And we'll give it a few more minutes here, well, seconds. And it looks like the chicken came first. Well done, thank you. Oh, wait, what? What? It's 50-50. Oh, man. Okay, oh, there we go. All right, I'm gonna freeze it, stop. Okay, there we go, there's our answer. Okay, so here's what we need to do. So this is the starting point. You are a UDOT project manager. It's 2009. There's been past studies for this corridor. It's been talked about for 50 years. They all have their previous alignments and cross-sections. You've got $8 million. You go to John Nord and Carlos at the time and ask them what they expect, and they say, trust the process, we don't know. So your task is to meet the 2040 regional transportation need in West Davis and Weber County. Okay, these are the maps you had at the time. Basically, the one on the left is Davis County area. The one on the right is the Weber County area. You've got about 16 cities you're working with, some really preliminary alignment information, and that's all you have. So the first question that I need you to weigh in on, how do you begin? So if you look at your phones right now, you should see, for those on the web, you can start to weigh in and pick a choice, or you can just text A, B, C, or D. Choice A is to model traffic to determine the area of need. B is to pick up right where the previous plans left off. C is to hire consultants and immediately start the public process. And D is ask Carlos, okay? So while those are coming in, I'm going to read. These are the things what happened if you chose those different answers. If you chose the A, by doing this, you realize the area of need is west of I-15 as far north as 12th Street. This allows you to prepare a well-defined scope of work and get started on the project. If you chose B, and you pick up where plans left off, the general public and the cities are happy about that, but the regulatory agencies and the interest groups do not agree. You neglect to review other alternatives and are accused of predetermining the outcome, and you lose in a court challenge, and you lose your job as project manager. If you chose C, you hire consultants and start the process immediately. Your scope is poorly defined and the public is confused and frustrated. The study spends a year and $2 million trying to figure out what to do. You keep your job but are taken to the woodshed. And D, if you said ask Carlos, Carlos dismisses you on the spot, okay? So what we did was we just had a really short-term contract to get some traffic modelers involved, just to get an idea, how big is this thing? How big? Are we going all the way up to Willard? Are we going to be just down in Kaysville? That helped us to at least start to get our arms around it. So this is our study area that we ended up with, starting down into Farmington, heading up to West Ogden. And every color represents a different city. So now that you know where you're going to study, what are you going to call it? Okay, so now you can weigh in, go ahead and vote on your little phones. What are you going to call this thing? A, North Legacy. B, West Davis Highway. C, the SR 67 extension. D, the West Davis Weber Transportation EIS. Or E, the West Davis Corridor. Now, just because we chose West Davis Corridor does not mean that's the right answer. This isn't just a session for everybody to tell us what a great job we did. We actually have some mistakes here that I'm going to talk about. Or 2020 is hindsight is 2020, right? So anyway, if we chose North Legacy or West Davis Highway or SR 67 extension, UDOT is accused of predetermining the outcome of the study, and the public expected a continuation Legacy Parkway. Upon a battle, it was an uphill battle throughout the EIS from which UDOT never recovers. The project stalls, and you lose your job. If it were the West Davis Weber Transportation EIS or West Davis Corridor, UDOT can show we are really open to any solution. We have no public expectation. We can truly trust the process. However, if you're Weber County, you did not like the name West Davis Corridor. And so they were quite a little bit offended at us for West Davis Corridor. So maybe West Davis Weber would have been a little bit better. This is the EIS process. There's 8 steps, and as I mentioned, we did start off with a broad, open mind to whatever alternatives might be on the table, and then as we step through each one of these steps, we focus on that, and we really have tried to trust this process throughout. We have a consultant team. One thing that we did on this project, we broke the environmental separate from the PI. And we also hired some experts in traffic to help us do some traffic oversight, knowing that so much would rely on our traffic modeling. And then we also have some legal counsel that's been hired for the project. And so we've got a team of HDR, Horrocks, CH2M Hill helping with environmental engineering, Langdon Group and Intrepid with PI and PR, Avenue and Interplan with traffic modeling, and Parsons, Bailey, and Latimer for legal. So that's our team. Now, this is one of the important questions that we need to answer today for our society. Who should be our next president? Go ahead, weigh in. Notice that E is Carlos Braceras. So A, Donald Trump, B, Clinton, C, Ben Carson, D, Bernie Sanders, and E, Carlos Braceras. We're going to get this figured out right now. And it looks like Carlos is ahead here. Carlos is ahead. Oh, Ben's coming up. All right. Well, this is pretty cool. Who would like to tell Carlos he's been nominated for president? And we need a campaign manager. Any volunteers? All right. Now, this is pretty cool. Well, good luck, Carlos. I told him we were going to possibly nominate him, and he was like, well, I don't know about that. So anyway, so you've got a team, you've got a study area, you know how you're starting, but what is your outreach plan? So here are your choices. A, tell everyone what you're going to build. B, visit every home in both counties. C, give everyone Carlos's cell number. D, implement a well-thought-out plan. Okay? And I'm glad I'm not seeing any vote. Somebody voted A. Well, let's see what happens if you tell everyone what you're going to build, you violate the EIS process, you upset the public, and you never recover, the project is stalled, and you lose your job. If you visit every home in both counties, you spend so much time and money that you run out and are dismissed after multiple woodshed visits. If you give everyone Carlos's cell number, you are fired. If you implement a well-thought-out plan, the EIS continues, but not without controversy. The trust you've developed with stakeholders keeps it afloat. So, EISs are controversial. There are going to be impacts. And no matter what you do, that's something that, kind of the theme that we kind of talked about was expect the unexpected. As much planning as you can do, you'll just never know what's going to happen. There will be some controversy. So it's important to have an extensive outreach plan. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So one of the important things is to identify who your stakeholders are. Who are your customers? And I remember sitting in a room with a whiteboard, and our team just thought of everybody and anybody we could think of. One of the tools we used in helping us do that was the 5P program that the Langdon Group helps us to use. Basically, you have political people, you have policy people, you have program people, you have project people, and then you have the general public. And at each one of those levels in every organization, you have political, policy, program, project, and public. And you want to make sure that you engage all of those levels. You also need to seek to understand their interest. It's really easy when you ask somebody about a project, they're going to tell you, well, I think this, or it should go here, or whatever. But it's good to try to understand where they're coming from, what is behind their concern. You also want to be able to know how to communicate with them. KPIs, that stands for key person interviews. As we met with every city, I mentioned 11 cities, we met with every city and we asked the mayor and the city manager, who are some key people in your community that has a lot of influence on others? And we wanted to go out and talk to them and get an understanding of what they were thinking and what would be great ways to talk to them. We did focus groups, we had a baseline survey done. We recognize this is going to be a fully transparent process. We can be grandma'd for anything at any time, so everything is available. We want it to be a friendly, informative website and give them access to the study team. And then try to anticipate their needs. Try and put yourself in the shoes of those who are being affected. And try to understand the impact. Never underestimate that impact. You may have, for example, on Mountain View, we had hundreds of homes that were impacted. On West Davis, we don't have that many. But we've heard a lot from those homeowners because those homes were their dream homes. We have other projects that are near the Great Salt Lake. I-80 goes right through the Great Salt Lake in some areas. But on West Davis, we're right next to the Great Salt Lake, right next to migratory bird habitat. And so we should never underestimate the impacts just because maybe we've done it somewhere else. And crayon lines, even though you may just draw it on a crayon and put preliminary all over your maps, it's still a line and it's still going to affect somebody's life. And so there's not a whole lot of explaining that, well, this is just a preliminary. Once you put a line on a map, it's going to affect somebody's life. As far as reaching out with cities and agencies and non-governmental organizations, it's all about building trust. Carlos talked about that our currency as a department is trust. One thing that really helped me was Vince and Dan helped me all the time in coaching me on the environmental requirements, on the political nuances, what's going on, so that I don't put my foot in my mouth, which I've done several times. I need to rely, as a project manager, I need to rely on experts and try to lead and make sure the communication is happening. We've done that by having site visits, get out in the field, walk in farms. We've taken tours with farmers. We've been out in the wetlands with agencies. We meet in person as much as we can because that sure helps, especially when you've got conference calls from all over the country. We've flown out to Denver. And we also established a stakeholder working group, which is a group of city officials, agency representatives, non-governmental organization representatives, farmers, tribes, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And for all of those folks, we try to understand their interests again. We acknowledge the impacts that the alternatives might be causing, and we try to find common ground, look for win-win solutions, and anticipate personnel changes. Over 6 years, we've had elections, 2 rounds of elections, we've had a lot of turnover, and so we need to make sure that we're watching for that. All right, so I mentioned the stakeholder working group. So you need to decide as a project manager who you're going to put on the stakeholder working group. So get your phones out, and A, do you give it an open invitation to everyone? B, is it only the resource agencies? C, do you put legislators in this group? D, is it cities, agencies, farmers, and NGOs? I think I already gave you guys that answer. And D, answer D, is it, or E, is it answer D plus resident representatives? Okay, and I'm so glad to see you guys chose E. Guess what? We chose D on this project. We thought, and this was my decision, this was my bad call, we formed a stakeholder working group, and I said, well, the cities, because it was getting pretty big, and we said, well, the cities can represent their residents. And we found out pretty quickly that that's not always the case, that residents, they have HOAs, they have concerns that maybe the cities aren't fully aware of. So in keeping with the choose your own adventure, if you answered A, you have an open invitation to everyone. If your first meeting, you have 3,000 people come. People are accidentally pushed through the door and punches fly. It's all over YouTube, and you're fired, okay? If you only invite resource agencies, the cities, farmers, and interest groups get frustrated that they are not invited to the meetings. You add them to the group later, but struggle to gain their confidence. Legislators, if you invite them, sometimes they get drawn into the weeds and are publicly caught between interests of their constituents. The public and agencies believe that the project is politically driven. And then we talked about cities, agencies. That's what we did, and then we were surprised at how much the residents wanted to be involved, and so we actually added them to the group later. And this is an example. In 2011, we actually had a billboard off of I-15. The residents pitched together in Farmington and had a billboard expressing some of their concerns and how it would affect their families, their kids. They also had rallies. The media was invited. I got to be on TV, which I don't want to do, but we had to do some additional outreach to react to this response. And so we added all of those highlighted groups, or all HOAs. We went from 64 groups to 95 groups on our stakeholder working group. And that's been a good thing. I think that they've appreciated being part of the process, having a seat at the table, and so that was a lesson learned for me. Now, another very important question, especially in the sports world, they'll be debating this for generations. Who's the better basketball player? Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, or Wilt Chamberlain? This is very important. This debate goes on and on, if you've kind of watched. And it's Michael Jordan. Okay, very well. Maybe I'll ask that in a few more years after LeBron James is done doing his stuff. Okay, now that you have your stakeholder working group and you've got your team, how do you develop alternatives? Do you just use the past plans, A? Or B, do you ask the public? C, do you ask the stakeholder working group? D, do you come up with your own ideas? Or E, all of the above? Very good. You want to do all of those things. You want to draw on all those resources. You use the past plans, but you don't rely entirely on them, because you could be accused of predetermining the outcome of the study, like we talked about. You ask the public, but if you only do that, you could miss out on some key technical solutions, and then you have to go back and do some rework. Same with the stakeholder working group. And if you come up with your own ideas and you think that you know it all, you're going to, again, waste time and effort when you get to hear all the great ideas from people at your public meetings. So all of the above. So what we did, we actually had 3 open houses. We let the public come. 46 different alternatives came out of that effort. You can see all the different lines on the map here. The purple are widening existing roadways. The yellow are new alignments, new roadways, 4-lane highways, 5-lane arterials, 2-lane arterials. We also had transit-only alternatives. And so we had a lot of alternatives, 46, and it's kind of overwhelming. How do you start to go through all these alternatives? So that is a question I'm going to ask you. As a project manager, how would you screen the alternatives and share the results? A, would you complete the screening process and share the results at the end? B, would you phase the screening into maybe a step 1 and a step 2 and then share as you go? Or C, would you do phase 1 and then share and then maybe adjust some and then do phase 2 and then share? And I'm really glad to see that most of you chose C. We kind of chose B. We had a lot of alternatives. We went through, we knew we wanted to phase the alternative screening process, so we went from level 1, went to 14 from 46. And you can see here that we did that by looking at the transportation performance. And so those shown in green are the 14 that we advanced. They cut the miles traveled in congestion by half. Those that were eliminated cut it still substantially, but not quite as well as the other alternatives. And these are those alternatives. We had 4-lane divided highways on various alignments, and then we had the widen I-15 and widen arterials option as well. But we still had a lot of alternatives, and so rather than going in and engineering all of these, we kind of stuck with these and did our level 2 analysis. Our level 2 analysis was looking at residential impacts, looking at impacts to businesses, to parks, to wetlands, historic properties, wildlife habitat, and out of all of those, there were 3 that seemed to have a lower level of impact than all the others. Those are shown here, and these are the ones that passed level 2 screening. But if you look at these lines here, you'll see that they're still kind of crayon lines. You can see down on the south end, you've got some sharp angles. Those clearly aren't engineered curves. And we actually went from 46 down to 3 alternatives in just a few months. And I think that what we didn't realize was how much, even though we told people these are preliminary alignments, once they saw a line, they reacted to that and responded to that. And I wonder if we would have taken just another 3, 4, even 6 months and did some more engineering. It would have cost us a lot of money to do engineering on that many different routes, but tried to just smooth out and try to predict what some of the responses might have been. And maybe that would have made it a little bit less controversial when we did share the results of screening. But we did the best we can, and hindsight is 20/20. So we arrived at 3 alternatives. And you can see where we started with 46 and where we ended up. Now, another really important question for you all. Which 80s band was better? We've got A, Duran Duran, B, Culture Club, C, The Go-Go's, D, Journey, or E, Twisted Sister. Yes, some Twisted Sister fans out there, I see. Very good. Oh, this even tells us percentages. Very cool. Journey, yes. Don't Stop Believin'. That's a immortal song. I hear it, my scouts sing it, my kids sing it. It's great. Okay, so now what happens if you're working through the environmental impact statement, you're trying to draft the chapters of the EIS, and you have some disagreements between cities or with agencies. So as a project manager, Do you move forward knowing that you have these disagreements? A, yes, you can't delay the study. B, no, all work stops until we have 100% agreement. Or C, yeah, but you take time to work through the issues, okay? Obviously, C is the right answer. If you would have just kept moving forward and ignored those agreements, those would have come back to haunt you. Let me actually read what happens. You move forward knowing several cities and agencies disagree with the results. When you release the draft EIS, you receive very negative comments, you never recover, and a new PM is hired to clean up your mess. Or if you stop all work, years pass as you try to get complete agreement between all parties, the cost of the project skyrockets, you still never get complete agreement, and a new PM replaces you. So by taking time to work through the issues, you work with each agency and city to understand their core interests, you bring them together to facilitate productive discussions, agency concerns are addressed, and political cities still remain with some cities, still leading to some negative reaction when the draft EIS is released. And so, like I said, you do as best as you can to try to get agreement, but EISs are controversial, and it's actually part of the process to release the draft EIS and have comments, good and bad, come to that effort. And that just helps us to know what changes we need to make for the final EIS. So we released the draft EIS. We had actually 8 alternatives, and we selected alternative B1, which is the Glover's Lane alignment down in Farmington, the orange alignment, which is along the Bluff Road in Syracuse, and then the easterly alignment along 4100 West up in Hooper. The reason we recommended that alternative was because it actually serves more traffic per mile, had a better interchange down south, had less impacts to 4F, to farmlands, to residents, and ag-protected areas, had a lower cost, and was most consistent with city plans. Now, at the time that we released the draft EIS, we received a letter from the Shared Solution Coalition. We also got some comments from the Shared Solution Coalition about a new alternative called the Shared Solution Alternative. Well, these are the typical sections of the alternatives we're looking at there. So we went through this process about 3 years in the making, and then as part of the comments on the draft EIS, we have a suggestion to look at another alternative. So, as a project manager, do you fully evaluate the shared solution alternative? A, no, it's too late for new alternatives. B, you advance it and do a complete supplemental draft EIS. Or C, you fully evaluate it as a draft EIS comment. So if you chose A, well, you can't do that. The project is challenged and loses based on not evaluating this alternative. Years and money are wasted, public frustration and mistrust, and you are fired. Seems like a lot of these end up that way. I might be giving this presentation next year, and I'll be released as the PM. This is what I did wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I hope not. If you advance it and do supplemental EIS, the project is also challenged because you did not evaluate it consistently with the other alternatives. So again, years and money are wasted, public frustration and mistrust, and you are fired. But by fully evaluating it as a comment on the draft EIS, it's consistent with the process. It also shows that you're willing to look at any alternative, and it takes more time, but it is in line with the NEPA requirements. And so what is the shared solution alternative? This alternative is it does not have a new highway associated with it. It's focused on trying to use and maximize the capacity of the existing infrastructure by converting some of our arterials into boulevards. So all of those shown in red are boulevard configurations. We'll talk about that. They feature innovative intersections, the CFIs, the through turns, the various innovations that we've come up with in the recent years. We have increased transit and bike facilities. It features ramp metering, aggressive ramp metering on I-15, and also proposes overpasses in I-15. And then a key part of this alternative is there are land use changes. And so moving from a lower density residential development, for example, to higher density mixed use centers and communities. So this alternative was suggested to us, and it must go through the same process to be consistent. Here's a picture of a couple of examples of boulevards where you have narrower lanes, you have narrower shoulders, you have bike facilities, wider sidewalks, You might have, for example, on the bottom, you can see you've got access lanes for parking, for storefront parking. Notice the land use difference on the side. You've got multi-level apartment buildings where maybe you have shops underneath and you have living quarters up above. But the idea was to make these boulevards more of a destination and not so much of a through facility, and that would help to reduce the demand, reduce the traffic demand. Also, this is an example of an innovative intersection where you might have quadrants that divert the left turns, or you might have ellipses that allow people to go past the signal and then do a U-turn. And you could feature transit stations within those ellipses and landscape it and do these sorts of improvements to maximize the existing infrastructure. So to develop this, we worked with the coalition and we worked with all of the cities, and we had several workshops throughout 2014 to develop the roadway, land use, and transit concepts. And we got all of that together at the end of December last year and said, well, before we know that we have some things we still need to validate. For example, how can we assure that land use is going to change its pattern from single-family residential to community centers? The cities are in control of that. The market is in control of that. Wasatch Front Regional Council, they do that as part of working with the cities for their long-range planning. There were some assumptions built into that model that we still needed to verify. How could we guarantee that the transit projects that were being proposed would be supported and be profitable for UTA? So there are several assumptions, but we thought, why don't we see if this alternative meets the criteria before we spend more time on it? And so we did an initial run, and it actually does meet our transportation demand if we're able to implement the land use concepts, the boulevard concepts, and some of these ideas from the shared solution alternative. And so the next step was to validate all these assumptions, the land use, transit, bike share, ramp metering, and capacity assumptions, which we've been doing in 2015. So what we did was we coordinated with WFRC because they are the land use authority that coordinates land use with all of the cities. We developed, for every city, we developed a packet that was based on higher density mixed use development along these corridors and in station communities and less development out west. And so lower densities to the west, greater density to the east. The coalition presented that to 11 cities, and 2 of the cities approved the land use scenario. We also hired RCL Co., a national real estate firm, to do a study of the shared solution alternative and what impact it might have on the land use. If you don't have a corridor out west, but you have these boulevards and these centers, these innovative intersections, will that trigger a lot of mixed-use development? And the study actually looked closely at it and realized that the trend right now is so great to go towards single-family residential because the land out west is so cheap that it would not reverse the trend away from single-family residential. We also visited with UTA. One of the proposals of the shared solution alternative was to take the $200 monthly front runner and bus pass and make it $50 for users and subsidize it somehow, subsidize the difference. And as we presented that to UTA, they thought $50 were probably pushing it. They thought maybe $100 could be supported. And then there was also a circulator route, a BRT route that they felt would work as part of the shared solution. And so we were able to go through and validate these assumptions, and we were getting ready to run the model and see how it did with the updated assumptions. And I'll tell you what happens right after you guys give me some advice for Valentine's Day. Now, I just need the ladies in the audience to weigh in on this. What should I get? And you can just type the answer right in there. Chocolate, trip, fruit basket, I don't know. Anyone? Roses, very good. Any other suggestions for me for my wife? I need help, really. Dog, uh-oh. Okay, PG-13, okay, now we're moving on. Okay, so we just validated those assumptions, and then in May of this last year, Wasatch Front Regional Council released its new 2015 regional transportation model. And so realize we've been doing all this work for the past 4 years based on the previous version of the model, all of our screening of 46 different alternatives, all the modeling, the working with the shared solution alternative, and now we have a new model. So, as a project manager, do you use the new traffic model? A, no, it will cost too much time and money. B, yes, and update the entire EIS. Or C, use it for sensitivity analysis. Okay? Well, A, if you answered A, the EIS loses a challenge based on not using the newest information. Years and money are wasted, public frustration and mistrust, and you are fired. B is actually what we are going to do. We did do some sensitivity analysis, and we felt like the differences with the new model are big enough that it warrants us redoing all of our screening for all 46 and now 47 alternatives. And so that's the direction we're going to go. The new model has the latest information on the household survey, how people want to travel, the information about people choosing transit, about people wanting to ride bikes more. It has more accurate transit scripts, and it's just more accurate. And so we are going to use the new model and do all of the screening again. And so our next steps are to model 47 alternatives. We're going to prepare the screening results for those. If the results are similar to what was released in the draft EIS, we'll prepare the final EIS. If the results are different than what we saw in the draft EIS, then we might be preparing a supplemental draft EIS. And that would be a discussion we'd need to have with FHWA. We hope to have an answer on the screening results by the end of the year, and at that point we'll update the schedule. So that's one question that some people might have. You know, when is this going to go to design and construction? And we don't know the answer to that question. We're still working through the environmental process. We have no funding for construction at this point in time. It's probably several years. The most we can do is keep trusting the process and take it one step at a time. And so we hope that we'll have some news by the end of the year, and we'll update the schedule at that point, and then we'll see what happens. So I'm going to take some questions, but while we're at it, if any of you wouldn't mind, give me some ratings on this presentation. A, was it boring and useless? B, was it so-so? C, was it informative, helpful, and fun? And D, was it unbelievably riveting? So while you're filling that out, are there any questions anybody has about the project? Yeah.
Well, you said there were two cities. You know, out of that, what were the two cities?
Farmington and Sunset City. Yep. Now, all of the cities were actually very interested in these concepts, and all of them are looking at doing some more mixed use in their cities. So this wasn't totally foreign idea. I think that the shared solution proposal was just pushing it a little farther than where the cities were comfortable going right now, densifying development in areas where they didn't feel like they had the infrastructure and didn't quite have the support. But I think we'll still see these kind of concepts moving forward in certain areas. So, any other questions on West Davis? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I know you've been doing this for a lot of years. At what point does the continual drain of tax dollars in this process begin to be balanced against the desire to make every last person happy? Is there a breaking point there?
There is, but I don't know where it is. Carlos is the one that's going to be making that call. You know, you say make everyone happy. You know, that's the question, right? Can we make everyone happy? And I used to think that in my, when I had hair and I was younger and naive. And I realized that happy is probably a little, maybe be a little ambitious for us. We recognize there are impacts. And what we want to do is at the end of the day, everybody who was associated with this project and contributed says, it was a good process. They followed the right steps. I was heard. They addressed my concerns as best as they could, and it was a good decision for the overall state of Utah. Good both for transportation, good for our communities, good for our environment. And maybe I didn't get everything that I wanted, but I can see why I didn't. But I did feel like it was a benefit overall, and that's where I would like to get to. And so. Maybe everyone will be happy, but but we'll shoot for everybody to be pleased. So it's a great question. Any other questions about the corridor? Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you all for being here. And if you haven't, there's some cards up here with links to the website. You can go up and sign up for any updates that you can hear about what the screening results will be by the end of the year. And at any time, if you'd like us to come talk to your firm or your group or your neighborhood or anything, we're absolutely available and happy to help. So thanks, everybody.